Hello at magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Sa video na ito, ating pag-uusapan ang Newton's laws of motion. Sa tulong ng laws of motion, mas mauunawaan natin ang relasyon ng forces and objects. Ayun, umpisahan na natin. Pero, bago ang lahat, sino nga ba si Sir Isaac Newton? Si Sir Isaac Newton ay isang kilalang physicist and mathematician. Noong 1686, kanyang inilathala ang Principia Mathematica Philosophiae Naturalis or the Principia o saan nakasaad ang 3 laws of motion. Ngayon, isa-isahin na natin. The first law of motion, the law of inertia. Sinasabi ng law na ito na an object at rest will remain at rest. An object at motion will remain at motion. An object will remain at its current state of motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. For example, ang bola na nanatiling nakatigil ay nananatiling nakatigil lang siya. Pero kung ang bola ay nagalaw, nananatiling siyang nagalaw. Teka. Nagalaw. Hindi ba at one point titigil yung bola? Di ba? Does it mean that it violates the first law of motion? Does it mean mali ito? Actually, no. It supports it. Bakit? Remember the phrase, unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. In this case, merong nagtigil sa bola. That would be the frictional force due to the friction between the ball and the floor. Pwede mo din makonsider yung air resistance dahil sa air molecules na nasa paligid ng ating bola. So, it actually still holds true. The first law of motion is still true. Hindi ko pa pala nasasabi na ang inertia is the tendency of an object to remain at its current state of motion. Kaya, for example, mas madaling magpalipad ng paper airplane kaysa sa eroplano. Ngayon, tumungo na tayo sa second law of motion, the law of acceleration. Sinasabi ng law na ito na ang acceleration of an object is dependent on the force applied and the mass of an object. Its relation is given by force is equal to mass times acceleration. This law also states that force is also equal to the change in momentum over time. Momentum is mass times velocity. Now, this formula accounts for the change of mass of an object. Isang munting paalala, force, acceleration, momentum, they are vector quantities. That means they both have magnitude and direction. Compared to mass, which is just a scalar quantity. It only has magnitude. Ngayon, balik tayo sa example ng aeroplano. To accelerate an airplane, a very heavy airplane, you would need a great amount of force so that it would go forward. Now that is the law of acceleration. And last but not the least, the third law of motion, the law of interaction. It simply states that for an action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Let's say, merong isang libro nakapatong sa lamesa. The book applies a force onto the table, and the table, therefore, applies the same amount of force but on a different direction, this time towards the book. This law of interaction is the reason why nakakapagpadala tayo ng rocket sa space. Bakit? For a rocket to go to space, it needs ignited air that exits at its end. And this exiting air creates a thrusting force that pushes the rocket upward, opposite the direction of the exiting air. That's the reason why nakakapunta ang rockets upwards towards space. Now that is the law of interaction. So, those are the laws of motion. Ulitin natin, let us summarize that. The first law of motion, the law of inertia. It simply states that an object at rest will remain at rest, an object at motion will remain at motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. The second law of motion, the law of acceleration. It states that force is equal to mass times acceleration, or to simply put, acceleration is dependent on the force exerted and the mass of an object. And last but not least, the third law of motion, the law of interaction. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. At dito na nagtatapos ang ating video. Sana marami kayong naintindihan, naunawaan at natutunan about the laws of motion. At dito na nagtatapos yung ating video. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat at muli, paalam!